وقال لهم نبيهم إن الله قد بعث لكم طالوت ملكا قالوا أنى يكون له الملك علينا ونحن أحق بالملك منه ولم يؤت سعة من المال قال إن الله اصطفاه عليكم وزاده بسطة في العلم والجسم والله يؤتي ملكه من يشاء والله واسع عليم.
And their prophet said to them, Indeed, Allah has sent forth Saul, Talut, as your king. They said, By what right shall he rule over us when we are more worthy than he to dominion, since he is not even very wealthy? He said, Allah has chosen him over you and has endowed him abundantly with both intellectual and physical capacities. Allah indeed has the power to bestow dominion upon whomsoever He wills. Allah is munificent, all-knowing. And their prophet said to them, Indeed, Allah has sent forth Saul, Talut, as your king. In the Bible, he is called Saul. He was a 30-year-old Benjaminite youth. There was not a man among the people of Israel more handsome than he, for his shoulders upward he was taller than any of the people. He went out in search of the lost asses of his father. During this search, he passed through the house of Samuel, and God informed Samuel that this was the person who had been chosen to govern the people of Israel. Samuel brought Saul to his house, took a vial of oil, poured it on his head, kissed him, and said, Has not the Lord anointed you to be the prince over his people of Israel? Samuel later called the people of Israel together and proclaimed Saul to be their king. This was the second Israelite to be anointed by God's command to a position of leadership. Earlier, Aaron had been anointed as the chief priest. The third case of anointment was that of David, and the fourth that of Jesus. There was no clear statement in the Quran regarding the designation of Talut, the Saul of the Bible, to prophethood. The mere fact of his being appointed a ruler does not necessarily warrant considering him a prophet as well.
وقال لهم نبيهم إن آية ملكه أن يأتيكم التابوت فيه سكينة من ربكم وبقية مما ترك آل موسى وآل هارون تحمله الملائكة إن في ذلك لآية لكم إن كنتم مؤمنين.
And their prophet said to them, The sign of his dominion is that in his reign the ark, wherein lies inward peace for you, will be brought back to you, and the sacred relics left behind by the house of Moses and the house of Aaron, borne by angels. Truly, in that is a sign for you, if indeed you are men of faith. And the sacred relics left behind by the house of Moses and the house of Aaron, borne by angels. The biblical version of this incident is different from the Quranic one. The former sheds light, however, on certain details of the incident. It shows that during a military engagement, the pagan Philistines had captured the Ark of the Covenant. Terrified of the scourge and pestilence which spread wherever they carried the ark, these pagans placed it on a cart driven by milk cows and sent it off. Perhaps the Quran alludes to this when it mentions angels, since the cart was driverless, and it was the angels who kept it in their custody and brought it to the Israelites. The Quranic statement that in the ark lies inward peace for you can be understood in the light of the biblical statements that the Israelites regarded the ark as highly auspicious and as an emblem of their triumph and victory. When they were deprived of it, they began to feel that they had been deprived of the mercy of God. The return of the ark, therefore, had a highly salutary effect on them, as it strengthened their sagging morale and raised their spirits. The Quranic mention of the sacred relics left behind by the house of Aaron seems to allude to the tablets of law bequeathed to Moses on Mount Sinai. The ark is also said to have contained the original copy of the Torah, which Moses himself had transcribed and which he had himself handed over to the Levites. The ark is also supposed to have contained a golden urn holding the manna, in order that the coming generations might recall God's benevolence to their forefathers during their wandering. The ark also probably contained the rod of Moses, which was one of the great miracles of God.
فلما فصل طالوت بالجنود قال إن الله مبتليكم بنهر فمن شرب منه فليس مني ومن لم يطعمه فإنه مني إلا من اغترف غرفة بيده فشربوا منه إلا قليلا منهم فلما جاوزه هو والذين آمنوا معه قالوا لا طاقة لنا اليوم بجالوت وجنوده قال الذين يظنون أنهم ملاقو الله كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله والله مع الصابرين.
And when Saul, Talut, set out with his forces, he said, Allah will try you with a river, and whoever drinks of it does not belong to me. He who refrains from tasting it, unless it be just a palmful, he indeed belongs to me. Then all except a few of them drank their fill at the river. But as soon as he and the believers with him went forth across the river, they said, Today we have no strength to face Goliath, Jalut, and his forces. But those who believed that they were bound to meet their Lord said, How often has a small party prevailed against a large party by the leave of Allah? Allah is with those who remain steadfast. Then all except a few of them drank their fill at the river. This may refer either to the river Jordan or to some other river or stream in that region. Saul wanted to take the Israelite army across the river. He was aware, however, that there was little moral discipline and restraint left in them. Hence he hit upon this device to distinguish the worthy from the worthless. Those who could not endure thirst, even for a short while, could not be expected to remain steadfast in their confrontation with an enemy at whose hands they had already taken a beating. Today we have no strength to face Goliath, Jalut, and his forces. These were presumably the people who had shown their impatience on the bank of the river.
ولما برزوا لجالوت وجنوده قالوا ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين.
And when they went forth against Goliath, Jalut, and his forces, they prayed, Our Lord, shower us with patience and set our feet firm and grant us victory over this unbelieving people.
فهزموهم بإذن الله وقتل داود جالوت وآتاه الله الملك والحكمة وعلمه مما يشاء ولولا دفع الله الناس بعضهم ببعض لفسدت الأرض ولكن الله ذو فضل على العالمين.
Thereupon, by the leave of Allah, they put the unbelievers to flight, and David killed Goliath. And Allah granted him dominion and wisdom, and imparted to him the knowledge of whatever He willed. And were it not that Allah repelled men with another, the earth would surely be overlaid with mischief. But Allah is bounteous to the people of the world, and thus extirpates mischief. And David killed Goliath. David was then in the early years of his youth. By chance he joined the army of Saul, just when the mighty champion of the Philistine army had challenged the Israelite army to combat. None of the Israelites had the courage to take up the challenge. On seeing this, David took on Goliath in a duel and slew him. From then on, David could do no wrong in the eyes of the Israelites. Saul gave him the hand of his daughter in marriage, and ultimately he became the ruler of the Israelites, would surely be overlaid with mischief. This enunciates the principle according to which God treats the nations as a part of the divine system governing the world. He allows various nations to attain power and strength within certain limits. But when any nation begins to commit wrongs and exceed reasonable limits, God brings forth another nation as a counterweight. Were the dominion of one nation or party to endure forever, and were its capacity to perpetrate wrongs granted in perpetuity, God's earth would become full of corruption and wickedness.
تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وإنك لمن المرسلين.
These are the signs of Allah, which we recite to you in truth, for indeed you are one of those entrusted with the message.
تلك الرسل فضلنا بعضهم على بعض منهم من كلم الله ورفع بعضهم درجات وآتينا عيسى ابن مريم البينات وأيدناه بروح القدس ولو شاء الله ما اقتتل الذين من بعدهم من بعد ما جاءتهم البينات ولكن اختلفوا فمنهم من آمن ومنهم من كفر ولو شاء الله ما اقتتلوا ولكن الله يفعل ما يريد.
And these messengers who have been designated to guide men, we exalted some of them above the others. Among them are such as were spoken to by Allah Himself, and some He exalted in other respects. And we granted Jesus, son of Mary, clear signs and supported him with the spirit of holiness. Had He willed, those who had seen these clear signs would not have fought one another thereafter. But it was not the will of Allah to prevent people from disagreement by compulsion. Hence, they differed among themselves, whereby some attained faith and others denied the truth. Yet Allah so willed, they would not have fought one another. Allah does whatever He willed.
Yet, had Allah so willed, they would not have fought one another. Allah does whatever He wills.
The main cause of the differences which arose after people had received true knowledge through the prophets, and which were even aggravated into feuds and wars, is not that God was helpless and lacked the power to put an end to the fighting. Had He willed so, no one would have the power to defy the teachings of the prophets, to take the course of disbelief and rebellion against Him, and to spread mischief and corruption in His world. But it was not His will to deprive human beings of their free will and choice, and to compel them to follow a particular course. He has created human beings on earth in order to test them, and hence endowed them with the freedom to choose from the various alternative courses of belief and action. God did not appoint the prophets as policemen to force people to faith and obedience. He sent them instead with reasonable arguments and clear signs in order to invite people to righteousness. Hence, the cause of all the differences and wranglings and fighting which took place was that people, in exercising the free will granted to them by God, followed divergent courses. In short, people follow divergent ways precisely because of God's omnipotent will that men should have a choice. It would be a grave misunderstanding to hold that people follow different paths because God failed to persuade people to follow the path which He wanted them to choose.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا أنفقوا مما رزقناكم من قبل أن يأتي يوم لا بيع فيه ولا خلة ولا شفاعة والكافرون هم الظالمون.
O you who believe, Spend out of what we have provided you, before there comes a day when there will be no buying and selling, and no friendship and intercession will be of any use. And they who disbelieve, they are the wrongdoers. O you who believe, spend out of what we have provided you. This means spending in the way of God. The instruction given here is that those who have adopted the cause of the true faith should undertake financial sacrifices for its sake. They are the wrongdoers. Here the expression, they who disbelieve, signifies either those who have refused to obey God and held their property to be dearer than God's good pleasure, or those who did not believe in the day of which they had been warned, or those who cherished the false illusion that in the hereafter they would somehow be able to secure their salvation, and that their association with men devoted to God would stand them in good stead, for they would intercede with God on their behalf.
الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم.
Allah, the ever-living, the self-subsisting, by whom all subsist. There is no God but He. Neither slumber seizes Him, nor sleep. To Him belongs all that is in the heavens, and all that is in the earth. Who is there who might intercede with Him, save with His leave? He knows what lies before them, and what is hidden from them, whereas they cannot attain to anything of His knowledge, save what He wills them to attain. His dominion overspreads the heavens and the earth, and their upholding wearies Him not. He is all high, all glorious.
Allah, the ever-living, the self-subsisting, by whom all subsist. There is no God but He. Irrespective of the number of gods or objects of worship set up by ignorant people, the fact remains that Godhead in its entirety belongs exclusively to the Eternal Being, who is indebted to no one for His existence. In fact, He is not only self-existent, but upon Him rests the entire order of the universe. He alone wields all sovereign authority over His dominion. None shares either His attributes or His power and might, and no one has the same claims against the creatures as He. Hence, if anywhere in the heavens or the earth someone sets up anything or anybody as an object of worship and service, ilah, either instead of or in addition to the one true God, this amounts to declaring war on reality. Neither slumber seizes Him, nor sleep. This is a refutation of the ideas of those who, in formulating their concepts of God, are inclined to consider God analogous to their own imperfect selves, and hence ascribe to God the weaknesses characteristic of human beings. An instance at hand is the famous biblical statement that God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day He rested. To Him belongs all that is in the heavens, and all that is in the earth. To God belong the heavens and the earth and everything therein. There is no one who shares anything with God in governance, either of the heavens or of the earth. Any conceivable being other than God would necessarily be a part of the universe, and thus belong to and be a subject of God rather than His partner and equal. Who is there who might intercede with Him, save with His leave? This is a refutation of the ideas of those polytheists who consider either saints, angels, or other beings to be so influential with God that if they were adamant in demanding something of Him, their demand would prevail. They are being told that, far from anyone having the power to impose his will on God, none, not even the greatest prophets and the most highly esteemed angels, will dare utter one word in the majestic court of the Lord unless they are expressly permitted to do so, save what He wills them to attain. Here, another blow is struck against polytheism. On the basis of the concept of God's unlimited sovereignty and omnipotence, it was stressed in the foregoing verses that no one shares independently in God's governance of the universe, and no one is so powerful with God that his intercession would decisively influence His judgment. The same point is stressed here, but in a different manner. It is pointed out that no one possesses the knowledge that would enable him to comprehend the order of the universe and the considerations underlying it, so no one can legitimately interfere in its governance. The knowledge of human beings, of jinn, of angels, and of all other creatures is limited and imperfect. No one's knowledge embraces all the facts of the universe. If someone did have the right to interfere even in only a part of the universe, and if his suggestions were of necessity to be put into effect, the entire order of the universe would be disrupted. Creatures are incapable of understanding what is best for them, and do not have the capacity to know how best the universe should be governed. It is God alone who knows everything. His dominion overspreads the heavens and the earth. The Arabic term kursi signifies sovereignty, dominion, and authority. The word kursi has been variously interpreted by Muslim scholars. The literal meaning is obvious. It signifies that which one sits on. Scholars have differed, however, as to whether the word has been used in the Quran literally or figuratively. They have also disagreed whether the kursi and arsh which occur in the Quran have one and the same meaning or are different. The main opinions expressed by the scholars are the following. 1. That kursi signifies God's knowledge, a view attributed to Ibn Abbas. 2. That is identical with arsh, throne, a view attributed to Hassan al-Basri. 3. That it signifies God's power. 4. In opposition to such views, a large number of scholars insist that kursi should be considered a reality rather than be understood figuratively. In addition to many earlier scholars, this view was vigorously championed by Ibn Taymiyyah. It should be remembered, however, that Ibn Taymiyyah and others who hold this opinion side by side with affirming that kursi is a reality also emphasize that man has no knowledge about the nature and modality of kursi, and that it ought to be treated as something unique, being related to God, who is unique both in His essence and attributes. It is interesting to note that Sayyid Qutb, martyred 1386 after Hijri, a contemporary of Maududi and one of the most influential Islamic thinkers of our time, has interpreted the verse exactly as Maududi did. He is all high, all glorious. This verse is generally known as the verse of the throne, and it provides in one piece a knowledge of God without parallel. The question that arises here is, what is the occasion for describing the Lord of the universe and His attributes? In order to appreciate this, one should rehearse the discourse beginning with verse 243 and continuing up to this point. In this discourse, the believers were urged to strive with their lives and belongings to establish the true faith, and were warned to get rid of the weaknesses which had characterized the conduct of the Israelites. A fundamental fact about war, that victory and success do not depend upon superiority in either numbers or weapons, was then indicated. They depend rather on faith, fortitude, discipline, and firm resolution. Thereafter, the divine wisdom underlying fighting was disclosed, namely that God removes one set of people by means of another in order to maintain the good administration of the world. For were one group's dominance to be assured in perpetuity, the lives of all other human beings would become miserable. This was followed by the clarification of a misunderstanding which often arises in the minds of ignorant people. This misunderstanding arose from the false assumption that God has sent His prophets so that all diversity and disagreement might come to an end. The people who accepted this premise, however, saw considerable diversity and disagreement, and were aware that falsehood existed side by side with truth. They were agitated by the thought that this state of affairs might suggest helplessness on God's part, that He had failed to stamp out the evils He wanted to. In reply to this, it was pointed out that it was not God's will to compel all human beings to follow one and the same way. Had it been so, man could not have deviated from the course set for him by God. This observation was followed by a passing reference to the subject with which the discourse opened. Finally, the point is made that no matter how many divergent beliefs, viewpoints, ways of life, and conduct exist in actual life, the reality underlying the order of the universe is the one stated in this verse, and it remains unaffected by the misconceptions of people. On the other hand, however, it is not God's purpose to compel people to accept it. Whoever rejects it will find the results harmful.
لا